Hello everyone. Tonight, let's take a long, quiet journey across time, across sand, and into the Nile Valley. A journey not of kings and pharaohs, not of pyramids or golden thrones, but of daily life. The slow, sun-drenched life of an ordinary person living thousands of years ago in ancient Egypt. The kind of life left out of most textbooks. A life that was more fragile, more taxing, and less glorious than the monuments might suggest. Before we begin, I'd love to know where and when you're listening. Comment your location and the current time. It's always fascinating to see how far and wide history travels to meet us in the quiet of the night. Now, take a deep breath. Let your muscles sink into the bed, loosen your jaw, and get cozy. Maybe you've dimmed the lights or curled beneath a warm blanket. Good. The night is yours. The past is patient. Let's begin. You arrive under a dull copper sky. The light is soft but unforgiving, like the hands of time itself. You stand barefoot on warm soil, damp and earthy, freshly kissed by the Nile's retreating floodwaters. The scent of mud, rich, fertile, a little sour, mixes with the faint sweetness of blooming papyrus. The air is heavy, thick with moisture, and the cry of an ibis cuts through the quiet hum of insects and slow ripples of water. You're not royalty. You're not a scribe or priest or noble. You're a farmer's son, a daughter of the reed marshes. The Nile is your heartbeat. It governs your hunger, your health, and your hopes. But tonight, in the deep quiet of dusk, you are only walking. You walk along the bank, between fields just beginning to dry and huts woven from rushes. Your feet know the path, worn smooth over years, yet your mind wanders. Because today, like every day, you carry more than your own weight. The Nile has just finished its annual flood. Achamet, the season of inundation, has ended. The waters, having risen with eerie dependability, have crept into every field and courtyard, drowned every path, and nourished every furrowed row of soil. Now begins the cycle again, ploughing, planting, worrying. You remember when you were younger, how the flood felt magical, when you didn't understand the consequences, how you splashed knee-deep in the overflowing water, your laughter echoing down the banks. Your mother yelled at you to come in, fearful of snakes. Your father, standing waist-deep in water, judged the river's height with eyes trained by years of disappointment. Too high? The granaries would rot. Too low? The harvest would fail. This year, the flood was strange. It lingered longer. The priests said the gods were angry. The old men say they've never seen it like this. You wonder what your grandfather would have said, had he lived to see it. You pass a neighbour's hut. The thatch is mouldy. The family inside is still awake, their silhouettes faint through the reed walls. A child coughs. A woman hums an old hymn to soothe the little ones. You pause. You feel the tug of shared struggle, how every home here breathes the same worries, the same debts, the same stories told beneath the same moon. You walk on. The village is small, pressed between the river and the desert like a wrinkle in a scroll. The palm trees rustle gently, whispering to each other above your head. In the distance, the pyramids glimmer faintly in the starlight. They're not near, not really, but the scale of them. It tricks the eye. Even from here, they dominate the horizon. Silent, brooding triangles against the sky. The older villagers say they were built before even their great-grandfathers were born. Some say they were built by giants, others that gods laid each stone. But you've met men who worked on those pyramids. Broken men, bent like reeds, men with ruined knees and empty eyes. You've heard their stories spoken in whispers around fires. Stories of days so hot that blood dried before it could fall, of backs flayed open by overseers' whips, of crushed hands beneath blocks that weighed more than a herd of cattle. You wonder how many bodies lie hidden within the stone foundations. Not kings, but labourers. Forgotten. You sit by the river. The night is warm. The stars begin to shimmer. One by one they form patterns you've known since childhood. The same stars your ancestors watched. The same stars that guided the calendar, the planting, the prayers. You know them by name. Sopdet, the herald of the new year. Sa, the soul of Osiris. The sky is a map of myth, stitched with the threads of divine stories. But sometimes, when you're alone like this, you wonder how many of those stories are real, and how many were told simply to soothe the fear of failure, the fear of floods that do not come, of gods that do not answer. You're 23 years old. Your hands are hard. Your dreams are few. Your name is not recorded in any scroll. No statue bears your likeness. You will not be remembered in stone or song, but you are real. Your sweat waters the grain that feeds the priests. Your shoulders bear the taxes that gild the temples. You are the reason the empire survives, and yet you feel small, insignificant beneath the weight of pyramids, unseen beneath the gaze of Horus. Still, the river flows, and tomorrow will come. You stand slowly, joints aching, and begin the walk home. Your hut will be warm, your sister will be snoring, your mother will be turning in her sleep, murmuring prayers even in dreams. You are tired, but not just from walking. Tired from living in a world that sees your life as a means to an end. Tired of being told your suffering is sacred, that your pain feeds the gods. But still, you walk. Because that is what people do. Then and now. Let the river's sound fade behind your eyes now. Let the Nile lull you into a quieter world. Let the stars turn slowly above, and rest. You wake before the sun, not because you choose to, but because the village is stirring already, and the smell of smoke from the hearth seeps through the woven walls of your family's hut, mixing with the breath of damp earth still clinging to the morning. There is no rooster to call you, just the low grunt of oxen being led out, the creak of wooden yokes, and the occasional bark of orders from an impatient elder. You stretch, but only briefly, because your body is not your own today. It belongs to the field, to the overseer, to the cycle of work that repeats each day with the same brutal consistency as the rise of Ra over the eastern horizon. Your father is already gone, his tools missing from the wall. Your younger brother wraps twine around a bundle of dried rushes, a torch for later when the evening comes and the flies descend thick and humming. Your mother hands you a bit of flatbread with dried figs mashed into its folds, not out of kindness, but habit. She doesn't meet your eyes. She hasn't since the taxman came 2 weeks ago and took the clay jars from your storeroom. The state granaries had not been filled properly, and the temple collectors were eager to remind everyone that the gods required their share first. You had protested then, quietly, but your uncle gripped your wrist so tightly that your bones ached for hours. He said nothing, but his eyes warned you. There are ears everywhere, and loyalty is demanded, not earned. You take the road that cuts through the far field, following others who carry tools worn thin from use. The sun isn't yet visible, but already the insects are awake, skimming low above the irrigation canals and nesting in the damp corners of your linen tunic. The fields are muddy still, though the flood has fully passed, and the ground sucks greedily at your feet with each step. You keep walking, even when the blister on your left heel bursts and your stride changes. You're used to this. Everyone is. If you can walk, you can work. And if you can work, you can survive. And if you cannot work, well, that is a quiet sentence no one speaks aloud. The field is narrow but long, stretching like a ribbon of green hope toward the hills where the tombs lie. You see the overseer there already, standing atop a flat rock with a staff in hand. He's not a priest, though he speaks like one, quoting lines from the temple scrolls about duty and sacred toil, and how the gods bless those who labour without complaint. He wears dyed linen and a beaded necklace that catches the early light like little stars. You remember when he was a boy. He threw stones at ibises and cried when his goat got stuck in the marsh. Now he speaks in riddles and commands. The work begins without signal. The blades of your tools sink into the damp soil, and with every pull your shoulders burn a little more. The earth is fertile, yes, but stubborn. You and the others pull and dig, cut and clear. You know the patterns by heart. Your hands move before your thoughts. By midday your tunic clings to you like a second skin, soaked through, heavy with sweat and canal water. Flies gather around the edges of your eyes, your mouth, your nose. You slap them away and keep moving. A boy near you falters. He drops to his knees and vomits into the weeds, his back trembling. The overseer doesn't come. No one does. The boy is new. He'll learn, or he won't. Either way, the work continues and the fields must be cleared before the planting. You remember your first week. The same heat, the same hunger. You remember the scabs along your spine where the whip touched you for the first time, not out of cruelty but out of rhythm. You weren't working fast enough. Now you know better. By late afternoon your hands are blistered, your legs caked with mud, and your eyes stinging from the dust the wind has kicked up. The sun lowers behind a stand of palms, casting the fields in long golden light that softens everything it touches, even the scars on your arms. But nothing is soft, not really. Not here. You pause only once to drink from a shared jar of brackish water, passed down the line like something sacred. You swallow quickly, because water is rationed and speech is watched. A man once joked, just a passing thing. He said the barley harvest was blessed by Set, not Osiris. The next day he was gone. The priests say he was taken to serve in the necropolis. Others say his tongue was cut out and he was sent to haul stone for the canal works in the desert. You don't know what's true, but you don't joke anymore. When the sun finally dips low enough that the overseer nods, you gather your things. Your back is stiff and your hands shake a little. The walk home is slow. No one talks. There's nothing to say that hasn't been said. The air cools slightly and the frogs begin their low songs from the reeds. You pass a shrine on the road, a tiny carved jackal with painted eyes. Someone has left a lump of honeyed cake there, an offering. You wonder who has honey to spare. At home, your mother is kneeling near the fire, stirring something. It smells faintly of lentils and burnt garlic. Your brother sleeps in the corner, curled against a sack of millet like it might vanish in the night. Your sister plucks lice from her hair by the light of an oil lamp. You lower yourself onto a mat with a groan, and stretch your legs toward the fire. There is no talk of the pharaoh here, no prayers to the sun, only silence, and the sound of old wood popping in the heat. The night will pass, the aches will fade, the work will come again, and still the river runs. The summons came not through parchment, nor proclamation, but through the village priest himself, walking slowly along the riverbank at dawn, his staff tapping against the flat stones with each step. He called only for names, not explanations. You heard your own, spoken softly but firmly, as if it were a number in a ledger. Your mother did not protest. She tightened the belt on your tunic and placed a dried fish into your satchel. It was all she could give, that and the brief touch of her hand on your shoulder before you turned away. This wasn't unexpected. The labour rotation was common. Every few seasons the village was obligated to send men, workers, not soldiers, to serve the pharaoh's projects. They call it corvée, though few in the village use the word. The old women simply say, "He's gone to serve," and they look at the sky with unreadable faces. You've known others who were taken before you. Some returned with new sandals and empty eyes. Others did not return at all. The journey is long. You follow the canal paths with a dozen others, walking in loose formation under the supervision of a temple scribe and two men with polished staves. They do not speak much, and when they do, it is always with purpose. Commands, corrections, names. The heat rises before the sun fully crests the horizon. You're sweating by mid-morning, but so is everyone else. You cross farmlands so wide they seem endless, peppered with white egrets and lone date palms bending slightly toward the west. The air buzzes with insects. Sometimes the wind carries the distant beat of drums from temple grounds, where priests conduct morning rituals. The scent of incense never reaches this far. By the second day, the limestone cliffs come into view, white and dry and blinding under the sun. You see shapes moving along the edge of the quarry, silhouettes of men lifting, dragging, shouting. This is not the Grand Pyramid site near the ancient capital, not one of the temples whose names are etched in silver ink across scrolls. This is smaller, rougher, a mortuary complex, the scribe says. Built for a favoured court official, that means nothing to you. All stone is heavy, no matter the title of the man who rests beneath it. You're assigned a place by the foreman, a tall man with a half-broken nose and skin that looks scorched permanently dark from years in the open. He says little, but eyes each of you like livestock. The next days fall into rhythm, grinding stone, lifting baskets, dragging sledges, sharpening tools. Your fingers split open on the rough ropes, the blood drying in little patterns along the handles. The air is filled with dust so fine it clings to your teeth. Your tongue tastes of earth even when you're not breathing through your mouth. The men you work beside are not all from your village. Some are from the north, their accents sharp and their words fast. Others are Nubian, quiet and strong, their skin darker than river clay, their voices low and musical. No one speaks much. You communicate in glances, in nods, in the simple shared understanding that no one is here because they want to be. Sometimes, during the midday rest, you sit near the base of the quarry wall and listen to the overseer recite hymns under his breath. He speaks of the afterlife, of the fields of reeds, of a paradise where men are free from hunger and pain. You wonder what a man like him dreams of. He carries a bronze knife on his belt, not for battle but authority. You saw him use it once to cut a worker's ear for spitting near the foundation trench. That man didn't return the next morning. No one asked why. The days blur. Each one begins before the stars have fully vanished, and ends with your limbs sore and your mind quiet. The quarry echoes constantly with the clack of stone against chisel, the creak of timber sledges, and the hoarse voices of men calling out distances. Time loses shape. You do not know how many days pass before you begin to dream of water running backwards and birds flying underground. One evening, while dragging a basket of gravel away from the pit, you glance toward the partially constructed chapel that rises slowly at the site's centre. It's modest. No towering pillars or painted halls, just a square structure of heavy limestone blocks, each carved with hieroglyphs declaring the eternal virtues of a man you've never met. The walls say he was wise, just, generous. The workers say he once had a boy executed for miscounting the linen tribute. You don't know which version is true, perhaps both. The priests arrive one morning with offerings. They slaughter a cow beside the outer wall, its blood running into a shallow channel carved into the foundation. A blessing, they say, a consecration of the ground. You avert your eyes, but you smell the blood for hours afterward, thick and metallic in the heat. You start to lose track of faces. The man who worked beside you vanishes one day. No one says anything. Another arrives. A boy, no older than your youngest cousin. His hands shake when he lifts the tools. He doesn't last the week. In the evenings, when the sun finally dips behind the cliffs, you climb the narrow trail to the camp above the site. From there, the desert stretches out in all directions, an endless sea of stone and silence. You sit on a flat rock, sip from a cracked jug of sour beer, and let your mind drift. You think of your sister, of the fig trees near your home, of the way the Nile glows silver under a full moon. You wonder what the gods think of all this stone, all this effort. Are they watching? Or are they only reflections of the men who build their temples, hungry, proud, and far too quiet when their servants fall? There are no answers here, only the sound of the desert wind and the ache in your bones. You sleep on hard ground, and in your dreams the quarry never ends. You are released from labour in the quarry not with ceremony, not with thanks or even a farewell, but with a nod from the foreman and a mark on a strip of linen. It is proof you have served your rotation. You tuck it into the fold of your tunic like something sacred. It smells of dust and the sweat of the scribe who wrote it, his fingers stained with ink made from soot and gum. It doesn't matter that no one outside the administration can read it. What matters is that someone did. What matters is that it has the seal of the temple at the bottom. Without that, you'd be pulled back into the pit by the next patrol and counted twice. The walk home is not joyful. You do not feel free, you feel empty. The days behind you cling to your skin like sand that won't wash off. You pass other travellers, grain porters, cattle herders, soldiers in linen kilts escorting a covered litter, and none look at you. You don't expect them to. The world is too busy looking upward, toward gods and pharaohs, to ever look down. Back in your village, things have changed and remained the same, as they always do. The river has receded further, exposing black soil streaked with roots. The palms are taller, the children slightly thinner, the walls of your hut patched with new reed bundles. Your mother's back is more bent than you remember. Your sister's eyes meet yours only briefly, then drop. She's taken your place at the fields in your absence. You see the rope burns on her fingers. You begin again, as if you never left. Your tools, untouched, are waiting in the corner. The harvest season has begun. You do not rest. You're told, gently, that the fields have suffered, that your share of grain will be smaller this year, that temple tithe comes first and you must understand, you must always understand, even when the temple itself forgets you. You go with your mother to the shrine that evening as tradition demands. The air is heavy with the scent of crushed myrrh and old clay. The shrine is no grand temple, only a worn altar near the edge of the field, with a painted stele depicting Osiris in faded blue and green. You kneel beside her as she chants the hymn she learned when she was a girl, and you say the words with your lips but not your heart. You watch the priest, who comes from the district capital once a week, his eyes sunken and his collar stiff with sweat. He collects the offerings, grain, fish, sometimes a bracelet or a carved token. and murmurs the blessings with practiced indifference. He doesn't look at you. You've started to notice how many things are spoken but not believed. The prayers, the praises, the invocations, they fall like dried leaves around the feet of statues. You've begun to wonder if the gods ever listen, or if they ever did. When you were young, you believed that Mayat held the world in balance, that every flood and wind and whisper was part of a divine rhythm. Now you believe only in the work, in the weight of the sickle in your hand and the calluses it leaves behind. At the granary, you are told that your family's share will be delayed. The high priest has ordered an inspection of the storehouses. The clerk explains this with a tight smile, his hands moving across a wax board in swift looping strokes. You remember him from childhood. He once cried when his sandals were stolen during festival. Now he decides who eats and who waits. You say nothing. There is nothing to say. That evening you pass the edge of the village and walk down to the riverbank alone. The frogs are out again, their low calls rippling across the water. A bark floats lazily down the current, lit by 3 oil lamps, its prow carved like a lotus bloom. You wonder who it carries. A noble? A priestess? Or simply another tax official on his way to remind the next village that the gods require loyalty? You stay until the lamps fade into the distance and the only light left is the thin sheen of stars reflected in the water. The next morning, your cousin comes with news. A man from the neighbouring village has been taken by the scribes, accused of hiding grain from the tax. He's being held at the temple hall for questioning. You know what this means. No one hides grain unless they must, and no one leaves the temple hall the same, not once the lashes begin. You do not speak this aloud, you simply nod. You understand too well the weight of silence. At the field, you overhear a merchant's son boasting that he's seen the great festival of Opet in the capital. He describes golden boats carried on the shoulders of 100 men, drums beating like thunder, priests waving palm fronds, statues of Amun swaying through the streets while crowds cry out in joy. You listen, but you do not imagine it. You know what those shoulders must feel like beneath the weight. You know that the thunder is not divine, but the pounding of heels and hands and fear. One night, your brother asks why the gods don't help when the crops fail. He's too young to ask in whispers. Your mother scolds him, but gently. She tells him that the gods always help, but in ways we do not understand. You watch her face as she says it, and you know she doesn't believe it anymore either, but she still says it. Some truths are not for believing, they are for surviving, and so you keep working. You wake with the sun and sleep beneath the moon. You fill your days with motion and silence. You begin to understand that most lives here are not measured in joy, but in endurance. That suffering is not an interruption, but a rhythm. And in this rhythm, you begin to disappear, slowly, gently, without struggle, just as the river disappears into the sea. The sun is pale and thin today, its light filtered through a curtain of dust blown in from the eastern desert. The sky looks muted, like old papyrus left too long in the heat. You're in the threshing yard with your brother, using a short stick to beat grain from stalks laid flat across woven mats. The dust clings to everything, your throat, your arms, the backs of your knees. You no longer notice the itch. You've learned to work without feeling. Your brother is quiet, he's grown thin this season, taller but less sturdy. You worry about him but say nothing. He's begun to ask questions, real ones, the kind that burn beneath the surface for years before they ever reach the mouth. You recognise the look in his eyes because it used to be in yours, but yours faded. The priest's assistant arrives in the afternoon with a scroll tucked under one arm and a waxboard in the other. He's not old, but his posture is already bowed, as if the words he carries have weight. His hands are stained with ink, and his sandals are new. He speaks with the clipped confidence of someone used to being obeyed. He asks for your father, and when he learns he is ill and cannot stand, he makes a mark on the board and turns to you. You follow him without being asked. The temple courtyard is quieter than usual. The statue of Thoth, god of scribes and wisdom, has been newly painted, its ibis head glinting with blue pigment that costs more than your family will see in 5 years. The scribe's office smells of oil and glue, and the clay tablets are stacked in uneven piles across every flat surface. The scribe himself is seated behind a low table, writing slowly with a reed brush, lips moving silently as he works. He does not look up until several moments have passed. When he finally lifts his head His eyes are red-rimmed and tired. He gestures for you to sit. He tells you the temple is conducting a review. There have been discrepancies in the harvest records. Some fields produced less than expected. Some grain went missing between storage and redistribution. The overseers are concerned. The priests are displeased. The Pharaoh's court has sent new instructions. Everything must be counted again. Every household's yield remeasured and retallied. He speaks without malice, but also without warmth. You are a column of numbers to him. You understand this. He asks if your father still owns the western plot near the irrigation ditch. You nod. He asks how many bundles of barley you produced this season. You hesitate. He notices. His stylus pauses over the wax. You tell him what you've told every collector, less than expected. The flood was poor, the soil was too wet, the worms ruined 2 of the bundles. He says nothing for a moment, then makes a note. He hands you a clay seal with a symbol pressed into its face, the mark of the granary. It's an obligation now. You must deliver 3 jars of barley next week regardless of your harvest. A shortfall, he says, must be corrected by the loyal. He thanks you for your honesty and waves you away. Outside the wind has picked up. The palm fronds shudder above the rooftops and the river smells like warm iron. You don't go home right away. Instead, you walk to the edge of the village, where the burial pits lie beyond the last line of trees. There are no tombs here, no carved walls or painted ceilings, just shallow mounds of earth marked with wooden stakes. This is where the nameless are buried, those too poor for limestone or linen shrouds. You count 4 new ones since your last visit. You sit on a flat stone and watch the shadows stretch across the field. For a moment, you allow yourself to think of leaving. Not death, just departure. Walking north, following the river, past the city gates and the noise and the weight of temples. You imagine working on a merchant bark, trimming sails and eating salted fish from reed baskets, shouting over the water to men who don't know your name. But the vision doesn't last. You have responsibilities. You have your brother, your mother, your field. You're tied to this land not by law, but by need. When you return home, your mother is grinding flour by lamplight, her sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her face is tired but focused. Your father coughs from the sleeping mat in the corner. The sound is sharp and wet. You press the clay seal into her hand and she closes her eyes. She says nothing. You eat a handful of lentils and lie down beside the wall, where the cool air drifts through the cracks in the reeds. In the night, you hear a jackal call from the far hills. You dream of the scribe's stylus scratching across wax, carving your family's name deeper into the ledger. A name attached not to glory, not to favour or reward, but to a debt that will never be lifted. The gods demand balance, the priests say. But you're beginning to understand that balance means something else to those who write the scrolls. It means suffering for many and comfort for a few. And you are not one of the few. The cough deepens. Your father, who once stood as tall as the stalks of flax before harvest, now lies curled like a broken branch on the mat near the hearth. His breath is thin and rasps like dry reeds rubbed together. The village healer comes twice, each time with a new paste or prayer, but her voice is softer now, her words less certain. She tells your mother that Sekhmet's shadow has fallen on the house. You know what that means. Everyone does. It's the old way of saying it's in the hands of the gods, which really means there's nothing more to be done. The sick house stands at the edge of the village, beside the ditches where the runoff pools in stagnant puddles and frogs gather in thick clusters. You go there with your father and 2 neighbours, one on each side, arms around his shoulders. He does not protest. That frightens you more than anything. The man who once shouted over the fields and scolded you for a broken tool now walks without question, eyes open but empty. The building is little more than a long, low hall of mud brick and reeds, with 3 stone basins and a central hearth for boiling water and herbs. The air smells of old urine, copper and stale incense. There is no true medicine here, only attempts. Teas made from lotus petals, poultices of fig and honey, chants repeated until the voice fades. A priestess of Sekhmet oversees the place, her head shaved, her mouth always murmuring. You have never seen her smile. Inside there are 6 others. One child, barely older than your brother, lies motionless except for the tremble in his hands. A woman, her belly swollen with pregnancy, coughs so hard she bites her tongue. 2 elders sit in the corner, speaking to each other in hoarse voices. You help your father lie down on a mat woven from river grasses. He closes his eyes but doesn't sleep. You ask if you can stay, but the priestess shakes her head. Only the sick may remain. She says it gently, but there is no softness in her eyes. You kiss your father's forehead and leave. The moment the door shuts behind you, the silence is unbearable. The village feels colder. The sun is still bright, but it gives no warmth. At home, your mother is washing his blanket in silence. The water turns red briefly, then brown. She does not look up when you enter. Your brother watches you from the doorway. You try to smile. You fail. The next day, you return with a bundle of garlic bulbs and dried dates, the best you could offer. The priestess accepts them with a nod and a few words to the gods. You do not ask to see your father. You hear the coughing through the walls, and that's enough. You leave quickly. The days stretch like thread pulled too tight. You go to the field, you thresh grain, you return home. In the evenings, you fetch water from the river. No one speaks unless necessary. You feel like a vessel, filled only with function, emptied of feeling. One night, you find your mother sitting outside, her hands in her lap, eyes fixed on nothing. She murmurs a hymn to Isis, asking for healing. You do not interrupt. You're called back to the sick house 4 days later. The priestess meets you at the door. She says only one word. Come. Inside, your father is still. His face is peaceful in a way you haven't seen in years. The pain has lifted, but so has everything else. The priestess places a scarab charm in his palm and draws the Eye of Horus on his forehead with soot. You help wrap the body in linen. You do not cry. Burial is swift. The village cannot afford long rites. There is no tomb, only a grave dug behind the elder grove. The priest chants quickly, the words rote and practiced. You lower him yourself, your hands numb, a handful of earth, a broken amulet, a few dates scattered as offering. Your brother stares, eyes wide, jaw clenched. He will remember this for the rest of his life. You do not speak during the walk home. That night your mother lights a lamp and keeps it burning until dawn. She tells you it helps the spirit find its way to the field of reeds. You nod. You don't believe it. Not anymore. The field of reeds is for those who are weighed and found pure, for those who lived in truth and balance. You've seen too much imbalance to believe anyone makes it that far. You return to the field the next morning. The same stalks wait. The same sun climbs the sky. Your hands remember the work even as your mind floats elsewhere. A bird cries from the reeds. A cloud drifts past the sun. Nothing stops. Not for death. Not for grief. Not for you. The gods are still watching, but they do not answer. The days become hotter as the season advances. The wind dries your lips until they split, and the skin on your shoulders peels in flakes no matter how tightly you wrap your tunic. The water jars are emptied more quickly, and the walk to the river becomes a ritual of quiet suffering. The clay pots grow heavier in your hands with every trip, though their weight hasn't changed. What's changed is you, thinner, slower, quieter. Food has become math. Everything is measured, every meal negotiated. You and your brother eat less so your mother can eat more. She works now, more than ever, and she speaks less. When she does, it is mostly to remind you to keep the door latch tied, or to save the last handful of lentils for the next day's porridge. There's no more honey, no figs, no fish. The temple took this month's share 3 days ago, more than they claimed in the record. The scribe smiled as he wrote it down, chalking the difference up to royal adjustment. You asked what that meant. He didn't answer. You begin spending more time at the grain house, trying to stretch your family's ration with the help of a friend who works the scale. His father once fought in the Pharaoh's campaign to the south, and returned with scars that never healed. Now he watches over the barley sacks with the weariness of someone who knows how much a mouthful of grain can mean. He helps you once, quietly, carefully, giving you a quarter jar more than your seal allows. You thank him without speaking. He nods without smiling. You don't ask again. You won't put him in danger. The bread you bake is rough now, flat and cracked, made from whatever flour you can grind from aging stock. Sometimes the flour contains grit, small stones from the grinding stone that get into the dough and grind into your teeth when you chew. You try not to think about it. The beer is thinner too, more like murky water with a bitter taste that clings to the back of your tongue. But it dulls the ache in your stomach. You drink slowly, stretching the sensation. You've started to understand why some men drink it before working, just to soften the world's sharpness. The brewer's wife tells you that beer is the drink of the gods, that Hathor herself smiles upon those who sip deeply. She says this while sitting in the shade, her arms thin, her eyes sunken. She used to laugh more, used to dye her linen red and wear beaded bracelets. Now her hair is mostly dust and she no longer prays aloud. You see the empty amphorae behind her house, and you wonder how many smiles Hathor has left to give. Your brother tries to hunt birds in the marsh. He returns with a single duck, small and lean, its feathers still warm. He's proud, but you can see the red bite on his forearm. A leech, maybe, or something worse. You clean it with salt water and wrap it tight. He doesn't flinch. He's growing used to pain. You cook the duck slowly, carefully, stretching it across 2 meals. Your mother adds garlic and ground mustard seed, and for a moment the hut smells rich again, like it did once when your father was still strong, and your sister sang as she kneaded dough. The memory is brief, but sharp. The neighbour's child dies that night. A girl, 6 or 7, skin like papyrus and eyes too large for her face. They say it was fever, or perhaps the water. No one is sure. The priest comes to bless the house, burning resin and muttering to Sekhmet for mercy. You see the father watching from the doorway, his hands clenched into fists, his lips moving but making no sound. You wonder what he's saying, or to whom. The temple sends word that the pharaoh's birthday is approaching. The village is expected to contribute a gift, offerings to be sent upriver for the royal celebration. There is talk of sending pottery, or papyrus, or embroidered linen. You're asked to help carry the chosen goods to the ferry. You do not refuse. Refusing would be noted, and being noted is dangerous. As you help load the baskets, heavy with dates, oils and beer brewed sweeter than anything you've tasted in months, you feel a strange weight in your chest. This food, this richness, will travel far from here. It will be offered at a temple where the floors are polished and cool, where the walls shine with gold leaf, and the statues are bathed daily. You're told that the gods dwell in those places. You're told this is why they smile upon the land. But they have not smiled here. The celebration arrives with no joy. There are no songs, no festivals in the village, only silence and more work. The overseer walks the fields with a new tally sheet. He says next month's quota will increase. He says this with the casualness of a man announcing a change in weather. You hear yourself nod. You feel your mother's hand tighten briefly on your shoulder. No one protests. In the evenings, your brother draws little pictures in the dirt behind the hut. Boats, birds, a temple with curved pillars. You watch him, not saying a word. You know he's dreaming of leaving, of becoming a scribe or a builder or a sailor. You remember when you dreamed too. You say nothing to him. You don't want to crush what little remains. Bread, beer, breath. That's what life is now. Each day a calculation, a trade of strength for survival, of silence for safety. And through it all, the river flows. It feeds the rich, carries the gifts, washes away the rest. You're not waiting for better. You're simply waiting. They come at sunrise, the masons, the artists, the scribes. Their tools are packed in linen rolls and their sandals are clean. They walk with the measured steps of men who are not tired, whose backs are not bent from the field. You and 3 others are called from the village to assist, not because you know the work, but because labour is always needed and your family owes the temple grain. The temple site stands just beyond the northern edge of the settlement, where the ground rises slightly above the floodline. Its entrance is flanked by 2 squat pylons of mud brick only half finished, and beyond them lies a courtyard of stone blocks and columns, still wrapped in scaffolding. The columns are wide and smooth and bare, for now. That is what this team has come to change. The chief artisan arrives on a donkey, wearing a long tunic embroidered with blue thread and a leopard skin across one shoulder. His eyes are shadowed, sharp, unreadable. He carries a wax tablet and speaks softly but quickly. He tells you the wall is to show the pharaoh's latest victory, his divine triumph over the enemies of the south, how he broke them like reeds and chained their kings. The gods, he says, witnessed it all. You know these are lies. Everyone does. No such campaign happened this year. There was drought, not war. But that doesn't matter. It never does. You're told to haul buckets of crushed pigment from the supply tent to the stone workers. The dust gets into your eyes and mouth, staining your hands blue and red. The artist mix it with water and resin, and use thin brushes to fill the carved outlines. You watch as they paint figures of bound enemies, their hands raised in surrender, their faces twisted in fear. You recognize one of the faces. It is Nubian, but not foreign. It looks like a man from your village, a shepherd who vanished last year after refusing to give his grain quota. You say nothing. Each panel is planned in advance, drawn first in red by the draftsman, corrected by the master with black ink. The pharaoh is always larger than the others, his arms strong, his face serene, his feet planted on the necks of his enemies. Behind him stands the god Immune, offering him a sword or an ankh, sometimes both. In front of him are the fallen, the kneeling, the pleading. You help the stoneworker lift one block into place. It takes 6 men. When it's settled, they cheer. Not you. You just wipe your hands and move the next. The scribe who oversees the inscription work is pale and delicate, his fingers smudged with ink, his mouth often pursed. He carries a scroll from which he dictates phrases: Pharaoh, the Lord of Order, who brings light to the 2 lands. Pharaoh, whose enemies tremble, who walks with the gods. Pharaoh, chosen of Amun, beloved of Maat. He repeats them without emotion. The workers carve them dutifully, each symbol taking time. You begin to recognize the pattern. Hieroglyphs repeated across temple after temple, truth flattened into formula. In the midday heat, you sit beneath a fig tree with a clay jug of tepid water and chew dried lentils. The other workers speak softly, not about the temple or the gods or the wall, but about their families, about the canal that collapsed last month, about a boy who drowned near the ferry dock. The youngest among them, the boy from the Western Bank, says he hopes to become a painter one day. The others laugh quietly. You do not. That afternoon, you're told to help carry a statue base from the supply pile to the temple forecourt. It is not yet carved, just a block of granite, heavy and smooth. The artisan says it will become the pharaoh in kneeling posture, offering 2 vessels to the gods. You wonder what it means to kneel when you command the world. You wonder if the pharaoh has ever lifted a stone or buried a child or watched his grain rot while priests demand their share. A new panel is started near the inner gate. This one shows a procession of offerings: oxen, bread, incense, gold, flowers. The people carrying the goods are smiling. You've never seen people smile like that while carrying burdens. The artisan gestures to one of the figures. He tells the painter to give it your face. A joke, maybe, or a mistake. But when you look, you see the resemblance. You're now a part of the story, a smiling servant bearing tribute, immortalized in pigment and stone. The irony doesn't sting. It doesn't even surprise you. By the time the sun begins to fall, the light striking the temple walls like a golden whip, the artisans begin to pack their tools. The master gives a quiet blessing to the stones. He does not give one to the workers. The foreman hands you a piece of dried bread and says you've earned it. You chew it slowly as you walk home, your hands still stained with the colours of a story that was never yours. That night, you lie awake on your mat and picture the wall. You see your own painted face frozen in joy, bearing grain you didn't have. You wonder how many others lie beneath those images, those who lived and bent and broke to keep the story alive. The next morning, the pigment on your hands has faded to faint shadows, but the memory of the wall remains, bright and hard and permanent, like the lie it tells. The heat settles in like a second skin. It clings to your back, your arms, your breath. The air hangs still, barely stirred even by the river, which has grown slow and shallow, its edges rimmed with weeds and dead fish. The Nile is not rising yet. The elders say the flood is late. Some whisper that the gods are displeased. Others say nothing, only glance toward the temple with tight jaws and tightened belts. With the heat comes the flies. First a few, buzzing lazily around the donkey pens and clay water pots, then more, swarming the walls, your hands, your mouth when you speak. They settle in your ears, on your lips, in the corners of your eyes. You can't keep them off. They land on food before it reaches your tongue. They cover the eyes of the dead before the prayers are finished. You swat at them constantly, but it's no use. They are everywhere, even in sleep. Your mother boils water with bitter herbs and pours it along the doorframe, a tradition meant to ward off sickness. She smears black pitch around the doorway to keep the worst of the insects out. You help her, but the walls of the house breathe heat like a kiln. By nightfall the floor is damp with sweat, and the oil lamp sputters in the thick, unmoving air. At the granary, men begin speaking in low tones. The flood must come soon, or there will be no planting season. And if there is no planting, there will be famine. The word is not spoken aloud. No one says famine. but it lingers behind every sentence like smoke. The temple priest visits the fields and performs a rite beside the canal, sacrificing a white goose and scattering barley into the water. He chants in long, measured syllables, face turned toward the east. You watch from a distance. You do not feel comforted. One afternoon, while tending the irrigation ditch, your brother collapses. He falls forward without sound, his knees sinking into the mud. When you lift him, his skin is hot and damp and trembling. You carry him home, his weight shockingly light. The healer comes again, lays herbs across his chest and speaks charms against fever. She draws symbols on the ground and asks for the breath of Sekhmet to be stilled. Your mother presses a damp cloth to his forehead and hums softly, the same lullaby she sang to you when you were small. The one about the field of reeds, the one you don't believe in anymore. Your brother does not speak for 2 days. His eyes flutter. He whispers sometimes, names of places he's never seen. When he wakes, finally, his breath is shallow, and he cries not from pain, but fear. You do not speak of it again. He returns to the bed mat and lies quietly, unmoving, as though waiting for the flood. In the village, the well water turns cloudy. Frogs die in clusters along the riverbank. A cow gives birth to a calf that does not breathe. The people stop whispering and begin praying, louder, more urgently. They leave offerings on every shrine, even the old crumbling one with the weathered jackal that children used to mock. Bread, garlands, beads. Someone leaves a perfect fish carved from alabaster. No one claims it. It vanishes by morning. The temple's high priest arrives on a bark from the capital, his linen white, his eyes rimmed with black coal that never smears, even in this heat. He's carried through the village by 4 men in silence. He does not acknowledge anyone, not even the children who stop to stare. At the temple he orders a sacrifice of oxen and the burning of resin so thick it chokes the courtyard with sweet smoke. He speaks of Ma'at, of balance, of the blessings of the pharaoh. He does not speak of hunger. He does not speak of flies. He stays one night, then leaves by boat at dawn. The river is still low. Later, when you go to the edge of the marsh to check the fish traps, you find the reeds brittle, cracked. The fish are few. One net is torn. The flies are worst here, a moving cloud that sticks to your skin and hums in your ears until you want to scream. You find a small pool still shaded by palm roots and dunk your arms in it, just to cool your blood. The water smells sour. You do it anyway. When you return to the village, the air is strange. Quiet. Too quiet. Then you see the smoke. A house is burning. One of the older huts, dry thatch and crumbling mud. Flames ripple through the roof like a sheet of light. The neighbours are gathered but do not help. The house belonged to the family who had hidden grain. The family who spoke out when the taxmen last came. The temple guards arrived earlier, it said. There was shouting, then fire. The father is gone. No one knows where. His wife sits in the dirt, hands curled around her knees, rocking back and forth. No one helps her either. The wind changes that night. It brings the smell of rot from the river and smoke from the ruined house. You try to sleep, but the air presses against your chest like a stone. The flies don't sleep. They crawl across your face, your arms, your mouth. You swat at them in your dreams. Your brother stirs in his sleep and mutters your name. You don't answer. The season of flies has only just begun. The flood has not come. The fields are dry. The temple says the gods are watching, but they still do not answer. You rise before the sky changes, before the pale line of light creeps above the mud brick walls, and the village begins to stir. The world feels still, not peaceful, but waiting. Even the birds are quiet. You move slowly, not from sleep but from caution. Your brother is still weak. Your mother hasn't spoken much since the fire. You pull your linen tightly around your shoulders and step outside. The ash is still visible near the edge of the village, a black scar against the dust. Nothing remains of the house. No frame, no furniture, no tools. Just a sunken patch of earth and a crooked clay pot, somehow unbroken. No one looks at it. No one speaks of it. You have learned how silence works. It isn't forgetfulness, it's survival. When the overseer returns, he doesn't mention the fire either. He walks through the lanes of the village with his scribes tall and polished in his linen, chewing a date as if this were just another count. He stops at every household, asks how much grain remains, how many family members are able to work. No one lies, not anymore. The lies were burned out with the thatch and the roof beams. When he comes to your house, your mother speaks. Not with anger, not with fear, just with a blankness that startles you. She tells him about the grain, the sickness, the temple work. He nods, notes it down, and moves on. You watch the ink dry on his tablet. You wonder if that small mark will mean you eat or starve next week. The days have begun to blur. There is no difference now between labour and prayer, between duty and fear. You carry water from the canal, and you give thanks to Happy. You clean the stone path at the temple steps, and you murmur words to Ma'at. You do not know what else to do. The gods are everywhere, and yet they feel so far away, entombed behind gold doors and carved into polished walls. One morning, a cart arrives from the provincial capital. 2 men step down, both young, both with finely trimmed beards, and fingers that have never lifted anything heavier than a stylus. They say they are scribes of the temple's central archive. They are here to collect records, writings, counts, census scrolls, but they speak of other things too, of the great Jubilee festival to be held in honour of the pharaoh, of new statues to be raised, of the surplus grain in the lower gnomes. They speak quickly, with the assurance of people who are never questioned. One of them laughs at the flies. You're told to help them organise the clay tablets in the temple storage chamber. You lift them carefully, their surfaces scored with neat, tidy writing. They are surprisingly heavy. One slips from your grasp and cracks against the wall. The corner breaks. The scribe looks horrified, as if a life had been lost. You're not punished, but you are dismissed from the task. Later, you listen as the temple priest explains to them the condition of the village, how the people are devout but tired, how the fields wait for the Nile, how some sacrifices have not been met. He says this all with a smile smooth and practiced. He does not mention the fire, he does not mention your brother, he does not mention you. That night, there is a meeting of the elders, not in the temple, but beneath the large acacia tree near the edge of the village, where the old stones still show faint carvings from before your grandfather's time. No torches are lit. The moon is full, and that is enough. You go with your mother, you sit behind her and listen. They speak of the flood, or its absence, of food that won't last, of water that grows worse by the day. They speak of the pharaoh, and of the priests, and of Ma'at. Someone, an older man with a limp and missing teeth, asks if Ma'at still lives in this place. The others do not answer. Another elder speaks of the god's will, of obedience, of patience. He quotes the Book of the Dead. His voice is soft, dry, and the words do not comfort anyone. Then your mother stands. She does not speak loudly, but the others fall silent. She talks of your brother's illness, of your father's death, of the tribute taken from your house while she was washing her child's body. She does not cry. She does not shake. She just says, "The wall at the temple says we are joyful, that we dance and feast and serve the divine with gladness, but none of us remember when that was true." No one interrupts her. When she sits, there is no applause, no echo of agreement, just silence, not the heavy silence of fear, but the brittle one of truth. After that, people begin to leave, one by one. No one speaks. As you walk back toward your hut, you see a child crouched by the ashes of the burned house, poking through the dust with a reed. Looking for something, maybe anything. You don't stop him. The next morning, a shipment of papyrus and ink arrives. A young scribe is sent from the capital to begin writing new praises of the pharaoh, to be inscribed in a hall not yet built. You see him writing beneath the shade of the tamarisk tree, his stylus moving quickly across the page. He hums to himself as he writes of blessings and plenty, of full granaries and joyous fields, of a people made radiant by the mercy of the divine. You walk past him in silence. He does not look up. The Nile remains stubbornly low, its surface reflecting a pale sky marbled with dusty clouds that promise rain but never deliver. Each morning, you watch the river from the bank, the edges lined with cracked mud and scattered reeds, the water sluggish and shallow. Fish flicker in small pools trapped like the rest of you, caught between hope and despair. The flood, that life-giving force, lingers just beyond reach. Your day begins as always, rising before the sun's full heat, carrying a heavy clay jar to the canal's edge to fill. The water is cooler than the air but faintly tinged with earth and decay. You dip the jar slowly, careful not to stir the silt. It is all you have to drink today. The women of the village gather at the bank in muted groups, their faces wrapped in linen veils to ward off flies and sunburn, their hands scarred from years of work. The irrigation channels, once full and flowing, are reduced to cracked lines of dry earth. The farmers speak in hushed tones about the damage, about the crops that will fail if the waters do not rise. The elders recall stories of harsher droughts, but the memories feel distant, like myths you can barely trust. For you, each day is marked by the same fear. Will the fields yield, or will hunger win? At the temple, the priests perform their rituals with renewed fervour. The high priest sprinkles water from a small sacred basin onto the altar, chanting prayers to Hapi, the god of the Nile flood. The air is thick with incense and the smoke clings to the stone columns. You watch as the priests dress in their fine white linen, their skin clean and their eyes blackened with coal, untouched by the dust or sweat of the fields. Their voices rise and fall in measured tones, speaking of balance, of Ma'at restored. But outside, the people's faces are drawn tight. The children grow thinner. Your brother coughs more often now, his breath shallow, his skin pale as the linen wrapping his arms. The healer mixes bitter herbs and murmurs spells against pestilence, but even she cannot promise health. One afternoon, you're summoned to the temple courtyard. The overseer needs extra hands to clear away debris and repair the mud brick walls damaged by last season's windstorms. You work alongside others whose bodies are marked by sunburn and exhaustion, their eyes glazed with weariness. As you lift heavy bricks, the overseer speaks of the pharaoh's generosity, of new projects to come, of statues to be erected in his honour. The words feel hollow, empty echoes of power. During a brief rest, you watch the scribe carving hieroglyphs onto a limestone slab. The symbols tell a story of abundance, of a land blessed by the gods, of a ruler who ensures prosperity. You know the truth beneath these carvings. The fields are barren, the grain stores shrinking, the people growing desperate, yet no one dares speak it aloud. That evening, as the sun sets behind the distant hills, you walk along the riverbank. The water laps quietly at your feet, but the promise of the flood remains distant, like a dream fading with the light. You think of the stories your mother told you, of the gods' favour and the eternal cycle of life. Now, those stories seem fragile, like the thin reed boats moored at the shore, swaying uncertainly in still water. The night brings little relief. The flies buzz relentlessly, their numbers growing with the warmth. You swat at them as you lie on your mat, the dust thick in the air, your brother's laboured breathing the only sound besides the river's distant murmur. Sleep is a thin veil, pierced by dreams of water rising, of fields turning green, of a world restored. But when you awake, the river remains low, the weight of waiting heavy upon your shoulders. The granary looms at the edge of the village like a silent sentinel, its mud brick walls thick and cool in the midday sun. You approach it slowly, your feet stirring the dusty path. The great wooden doors are closed, locked tight by the temple guards, their faces stern and unreadable beneath their linen headcloths. The smell of stored grain, sweet, musty and heavy, drifts out whenever the doors creak open for a few moments. Inside, the sacks of barley and emmer wheat are piled high, stacked carefully against the walls and across the floor. This is the heart of the village's survival, the measure of its fate, but much of it does not belong to you. It belongs to the temple, to the pharaoh, to the unseen forces that govern your life in ways you cannot touch. The overseer has been coming more frequently, accompanied by scribes who record every sack, every measure taken or left behind. You hear them whispering of quotas and levies, of increasing demands from the capital, of grain to be shipped downriver for the royal storehouses. Some of the grain is meant as seed for the coming planting season, but much will never return to the village. You recall the day when your family's last sack was taken, when the tax collector came with no mercy, balancing his scales and jotting numbers on a worn papyrus scroll. Your father argued, but words meant nothing. Your mother cried quietly in the corner. You held your brother close, feeling the thinness of his body against yours. The granary took what it wanted. Hunger waited patiently. Outside the granary, the villagers gather in small groups, speaking in low voices. Some say they have hidden small stores beneath their floors or in shallow pits. Others have begun to barter what little they have: jars of oil, bundles of flax, even precious beads passed down from ancestors, for a handful of grain. But the risk is great. If the temple's guards discover such caches, the punishment is severe. One evening, a young woman approaches you. She's from the next village upriver, sent by her family to seek help or food. Her eyes are wide with fear and exhaustion. She tells you of fields turned to dust, of families reduced to eating roots and dried fish scraps. She carries a small bundle of dried herbs wrapped in linen. You share your water and bread, knowing it will not be enough. That night the village is restless. The usual songs and laughter are absent. Instead, the air hums with whispered prayers and muted curses. The fires burn lower, their smoke thin against the sky. You lie awake, imagining the granary doors sealed tight, the grain slipping away like sand through fingers. The temple bells ring at dawn, calling the faithful to prayer. The priests chant hymns of plenty and divine favour, their voices rising in confident harmony. You wonder if they can see beyond the walls, beyond the sacred precincts, to the fields where the soil cracks and the people starve. You rise and prepare for another day of waiting, of labour, of carrying burdens invisible but crushing. The granary stands like a fortress, its silence heavier than stone, and inside it, the weight of grain is matched only by the weight of hope, fragile and fleeting, hanging in the balance like a single grain of sand on the riverbank. The sun climbs higher, relentless and unyielding, beating down upon the cracked mud-brick houses clustered like tired survivors along the narrow streets. You step carefully between uneven stones, feeling the dust rise and settle thickly over your feet, the dry earth brittle beneath the weight of the heat. The village feels smaller, quieter, as though shrinking beneath the burden of the season. Your home, once sturdy and full of life, now shows its wear. The walls, once smooth and plastered with mud mixed with straw, bear fissures like scars, thin cracks zigzagging across the surface. Your mother traces one with her fingers, lips pressed in a thin line. She says the earth beneath the village is restless, shifting beneath the heavy weight of seasons without water. The cracks whisper warnings you cannot ignore. Neighbours speak of their own houses. One family lost a roof beam during a recent windstorm. Another's doorway has warped and no longer closes properly. These are not merely signs of age, but symbols of vulnerability. The village, like its people, wears the strain openly. You spend the morning helping to mix fresh plaster, blending mud, straw and water into a thick paste. Your hands grow raw and sticky as you apply the mixture to the walls, filling cracks, smoothing surfaces. It is tiring work, but necessary. Every patch is a small battle against the slow decay of time and hardship. The overseer visits again, his eyes sharp and unyielding as he inspects the village's condition. His words are brief, complaints about missed temple dues and insufficient offerings. He ignores the cracks, the weariness in the people's faces. Instead, he demands more labour for the upcoming temple expansion project, more stone to be quarried, more bricks to be fired. There is no respite. At the well, the water is low and salty, its taste bitter against your tongue. You carry your jar back with care, feeling the weight in your hands and wondering how much longer the earth will give, the villagers' whisper of sickness spreading, fevers that come with the heat, rashes that blister the skin, and coughs that do not end. The healer moves from hut to hut, her remedies limited and often failing. The temple bells toll in the afternoon, calling for offerings and prayers. From a distance you watch the priests draped in fine linens, their voices rising in ritual chants. Their world feels distant, untouched by the cracks spreading through your home, your village, your life. That evening, as twilight softens the sky to dusky pink and purple, you sit beneath the acacia tree with a handful of neighbours. The cracks in the walls become cracks in conversation. Voices falter and rise in quiet anger, sadness and resignation. Words of hope are fragile, slipping away like dust in the wind. You think of the village as a house itself, weathered, cracked, but still standing. Yet the walls strain against the weight of years without relief, and you wonder how long before the cracks become a breaking. The morning light filters weakly through the thin linen curtains of your hut, casting long shadows on the packed earth floor. Your muscles ache before the day has even begun, a dull and persistent reminder of yesterday's toil and the promise of more to come. The overseer's summons came last night, another call to labour on the royal works. There is no choice, no question, only the relentless rhythm of duty. You join a group of villagers already gathered near the edge of the fields, their faces drawn and eyes heavy with exhaustion. Men and women alike shoulder tools, wooden mallets, stone chisels, baskets woven tight and heavy. The overseer moves among you, his voice sharp and commanding, his words empty of sympathy. The pharaoh's monuments will stand for eternity. Your work will be remembered. The irony is not lost on you. Your name will not be carved into the stone. Your sweat and blood will be absorbed by the dust and heat, your face forgotten beneath the sun. Yet still you labour, because survival demands it. There is food, grain, and water only as long as the quotas are met, the taxes paid. The work is brutal. You haul massive blocks of limestone from the quarry, muscles straining against weight beyond what your body should bear. The sun climbs mercilessly, the air thick with dust and the sharp scent of stone. Sweat trickles down your back, mingling with grime and fatigue. Blisters form on your hands, your breath comes in ragged gasps, and still the overseer urges you on. Nearby, a man collapses suddenly, his face pale and lips cracked. The overseer ignores him, moving on to bark orders at others. The man is helped up by friends and led away silently. There is no space here for weakness. Amidst the labour, whispers circulate about the pharaoh's grand plans, new temples, statues, and canals. Promises made by those who will never see the sweat-soaked fields or cracked mud bricks of your village. You hear of craftsmen brought from distant lands, their work praised in the city, while you and your neighbours toil beneath the open sky, nameless and unseen. At midday, the overseer calls for a brief rest. You sit on a rough stone, hands trembling as you drink the bitter water brought from the well. Around you, the others share tired smiles, a fragile camaraderie forged in shared hardship. Some speak of dreams, of escaping the endless labour, of finding a life beyond the village walls, but such thoughts are fleeting. When the sun begins its slow descent, the overseer declares the day's work done. You stumble back to the village, every step a protest from aching limbs. The evening air is cooler, but the weight on your shoulders remains. Back home, your mother tends to your brother, whose coughing worsens with the dust and exhaustion. You share a meagre meal, flatbread, a few dates, and bitter herbs, and listen to the night sounds, the restless buzz of flies, the distant call of a jackal, the whisper of wind through dry reeds. The monuments rise slowly in the distance, towering shadows against the fading sky. They gleam with promise to the world, but to you they are monuments to sacrifice, of lives spent in endless labour, of joys postponed, of burdens borne quietly beneath the sun's harsh gaze. You wake before dawn, the world wrapped in a cool, pale light that softens the jagged edges of the village. The sounds are faint, the distant murmur of the Nile, the rustling of palm leaves, the soft breathing of your family. Today, you must visit the temple again, carrying offerings and preparing for the rituals dictated by the priests. As you walk the narrow, dusty streets, the weight of the temple's presence settles around you like a shadow. Its towering columns and ornate carvings speak of gods and kings, of divine order and eternal power. Yet beneath their grandeur, you know there is another story, the one not written on walls or sung in hymns, the story of those whose lives are bound tightly to the temple's demands. Inside the temple courtyard, the air is thick with incense and the low hum of chanting priests. You watch as the high priest, adorned in fine linen and gold, raises his arms to the sky, calling upon the gods to bless the land. The priest's voices rise and fall in measured rhythm, their words weaving promises of balance and favour. But their eyes never meet yours. You bring your offerings forward, small jars of oil, woven baskets of grain, fresh dates. These gifts will feed the gods, or so the priests say. But you know they also feed the temple's power, the machinery that controls your life. The offerings become taxes, the prayers become laws. A scribe approaches, his gaze sharp beneath a painted brow. He asks your name, your family, your work. You answer quietly, feeling exposed beneath his scrutiny. The scribe's pen moves swiftly across papyrus, recording details that will be used to measure your worth, your loyalty. Later you sit by the temple's outer wall, the sun warming your skin. A priest passes, his expression unreadable. You recall the stories told by your mother, how the pharaoh is the living god, how the temple holds the key to Mayat, the cosmic order. But as you watch the priests and scribes, you wonder whose order they serve. In the shadows of the temple, workers haul stone and carry water, their faces tired and hands calloused. Some are your neighbours, others strangers brought from distant lands. They share no words with the priests, their labour unseen, their pain unspoken. You think of your brother, his coughing worse today, his eyes glassy with fever. You pray silently, not for grand miracles, but for simple mercy, for relief from the unyielding weight of life. The gods above seem distant, their eyes fixed on statues and altars rather than the broken village beyond the temple gates. As the sun dips low, casting long shadows, you rise and leave the temple grounds. The chants fade behind you, replaced by the rustle of palm fronds and the restless buzz of flies. The temple stands tall and proud, a beacon of power and faith, but beneath its stones lies a world of silence and struggle, of lives lived in the shadow of gods whose favour is as uncertain as the shifting sands. The day begins with a dull ache behind your eyes, a heaviness that seems to settle deep in your bones. The heat presses relentlessly, thickening the air until it feels like a weight on your chest. Outside, the village moves slowly, subdued by an invisible threat that has crept into your midst. The shadow of disease. You see it in the children, their skin pale and clammy, their small bodies trembling with fever. Your brother lies on a thin mat, his breathing shallow, eyes glassy and distant. The healer's hands are gentle but tired as she mixes herbs and chants prayers, yet you sense her growing helplessness. The ailments she treats are relentless: fevers, infections, respiratory troubles, and many do not relent. The Nile's waters, once a source of life, have become tainted in the dry season. Stagnant pools form along the banks, breeding mosquitoes that bite and spread illness. The village well is shallow and prone to contamination. Clean water is a luxury few can afford, and sickness follows where the water falters. You walk through the village, the buzz of flies thick in the warm air, their presence a constant irritation and an omen of decay. Mothers cradle weak infants, their faces etched with worry. The village elders speak quietly of past plagues, of God's wrath and curses, but these stories feel distant compared to the reality you see. The temple priests hold ceremonies to appease Sekhmet, the fierce lioness goddess said to bring both plague and healing. Their chants fill the air, voices rising in supplication, but there is little comfort in ritual when sickness is a constant companion. The priests seem more concerned with preserving their power than the well-being of the people who suffer beyond the temple's walls. You help tend to your brother, wiping sweat from his brow, offering sips of cool water from a chipped clay cup. Each breath he takes is a struggle, each cough a sharp reminder of fragility. The night stretches long and restless, filled with whispered prayers and silent tears. As dawn breaks, the village is cloaked in a heavy silence, broken only by the occasional cry or the distant call of a water bird along the river. The cycle of life and death continues, unseen yet ever present. Disease is an invisible tide that no walls or prayers can hold back, a quiet force shaping your days and nights. You wonder how many more mornings will come before the floodwaters rise again, before the earth yields, before relief finds this place. Until then, you carry the weight of sickness alongside hunger, labour, and silence, an unspoken struggle etched deeply into the story of your life in ancient Egypt. The sun hangs low in the sky, casting a warm golden light over the village. Yet beneath this gentle glow, an unseen web of stories and images twists through every corner of your world. Stories crafted by those in power, masks worn to hide the harsh truths beneath. The royal propaganda is everywhere, woven into stone, painted on papyrus, and whispered in the temple's halls. You pass by a newly erected statue of the pharaoh, its polished surface gleaming in the afternoon light. His face is calm, strong, eternal, a god among men. Around his neck, necklaces of gold and precious stones catch the sun, symbols of wealth and divine favour. But you know the cost behind that shining image, the grain taken from your granary, the labour forced from your aching arms, the lives spent in silent suffering. The scribes have been busy, carving inscriptions that sing praises of the ruler's wisdom and benevolence. They tell of grand victories, fertile lands, and happy people living under a just king. These words drip like honey, sweet and convincing, yet they feel distant from the cracked walls of your home, from the hunger in your belly, from the sickness that haunts your brother's breath. In the marketplace, a travelling storyteller recounts tales of the pharaoh's greatness, his divine right to rule, and the blessings he bestows upon Egypt. The crowd listens in rapt attention, children wide-eyed and adults nodding with reverence. The story blurs the edges of reality, painting a world where hardship is absent, where the gods smile constantly, and where your struggles are invisible. You remember your father's quiet voice when he spoke of the official stories and the real ones. He spoke of how the rulers' words were designed to keep control, to mask the true costs of their glory, to silence dissent. Those who questioned or resisted faced punishment, their voices lost in the dust. At the temple, priests reinforced these messages, framing the pharaoh as the living embodiment of Ma'at, order, justice, and harmony. Yet outside the temple gates, chaos brews in the form of poverty, illness, and despair. The gap between image and reality stretches wider each day. You carry this contradiction like a heavy cloak, feeling both the awe inspired by the pharaoh's carved visage and the bitter sting of truth. The masks of propaganda shield those in power, but they cannot hide the cracks beneath, the hunger, the toil, the silent suffering that no statue or hymn can erase. As the sun dips below the horizon, the village settles into uneasy quiet. The shadows grow long, and the stories told by the powerful drift away on the evening breeze, leaving behind only the raw, unvarnished life lived beneath their gaze. The morning mist clings gently to the reeds by the river, softening the edges of the world as you rise from your restless sleep. Today, like every day, the rhythms of faith will guide your steps, though the weight of belief often feels heavier than the burdens you carry with your hands. Religion is woven into every moment, every action, every breath, and yet it is a double-edged thread, both comfort and constraint. You prepare a small offering for the household shrine, a few grains of barley, a handful of dates, and a sprig of fragrant herbs plucked from the garden. Your mother whispers prayers to household gods, beseeching protection and favour, while your father mutters thanks for another day, though the lines on his face betray doubt beneath his words. The gods are present everywhere, in the mighty Nile, in the fiery sun, in the fertile earth, and in the towering temples. Their stories shape your understanding of the world. Ra's daily journey across the sky, Osiris's promise of rebirth, and Anubis's guidance through the afterlife. The priests teach that honouring these gods maintains Ma'at, the divine balance essential to life itself. Yet this faith demands sacrifices, time, labour, grain, and unwavering obedience. Each festival, each ritual, each prayer calls on the people to give more. The temples rise higher, the priests grow wealthier, and the village bears the strain. The offerings you make, small as they seem, are part of a vast economy of devotion that sustains the ruling class and its hold over the land. You watch as a neighbour is led to the temple to serve as a labourer for the priests, carving statues or polishing sacred objects. His family weeps quietly, knowing his absence will be long and hard. Many young men are conscripted this way, their lives redirected by divine duty, their own hopes deferred. The stories of the gods offer solace in dark times, but they also enforce a world where suffering is part of the cosmic order, where famine is punishment, disease a test, and hardship a pathway to spiritual purification. Questioning the gods is unthinkable. To do so is to invite chaos, to break the fragile balance upon which everything rests. As the sun climbs, you join others at the temple steps, watching as priests lead ceremonies filled with incense, chants, and offerings. Their voices rise in measured harmony, weaving spells of protection and power. You feel both awe and a quiet resignation, caught between reverence for the divine and the heavy chains of duty and expectation. By evening, the village is bathed in a soft glow, lanterns flickering like stars in the encroaching darkness. The weight of belief settles over you again, a silent presence that shapes your world as surely as the river shapes the land. It offers hope, yes, but also demands surrender, to gods, to rulers, to the unyielding tide of tradition. And so, beneath the eternal gaze of the gods, life continues, fragile, burdened, and endlessly entwined with faith. The sun is a dull orb behind a veil of dust and haze as you rise before dawn to begin the day's work in the fields. The fertile floodplains of the Nile stretch before you, but today they feel barren and unyielding. The harvest season, meant to be a time of abundance and celebration, carries a quiet desperation this year. You step into the mud, the coolness beneath your feet a brief relief from the growing heat. The stalks of emmer wheat stand thin and brittle, their golden heads sparse. The flood was late, or perhaps the waters didn't reach far enough this year. The soil, once rich with silt, has hardened and cracked. Around you, other villagers move slowly, bent over their sickles and baskets. Their faces are etched with weariness, the lines deepened by months of hunger and worry. Conversations are sparse, replaced by the steady rhythm of cutting and gathering, the only sound the soft swish of blades against stalks and the muted murmur of the river nearby. Your hands tremble as you grasp a handful of grain, its weight disappointingly light. You think of the temple's granaries, filled with reserves collected through taxes and offerings. The contrast stings, your own family's stomachs empty while the royal storehouses overflow. A child runs past, clutching a small basket filled with a few stray grains, his laughter brief and fragile. It is a reminder of the resilience that persists despite hardship, but also of how much is at stake. The harvest is not just food, it is survival, a fragile thread connecting the seasons, the gods, and the people. You pause, looking up at the pale sky. The gods are silent today, their blessings uncertain. The temple's chants echo faintly in the distance, but they cannot reach the parched earth or ease the tightening knot in your chest. As the day wears on, the baskets slowly fill, but never enough. The village's portion will barely last through the coming months. There will be hunger, quiet and relentless, as families ration what little remains. Returning home, you carry your share with a heavy heart. The fields have yielded their truth. Life here is fragile, marked by uncertainty and struggle beneath the ancient sun. The morning light filters weakly through the shutters of your small hut, revealing the dust particles that dance in the still air. Today is the day the tax collectors will arrive. A dull tension settles in your chest, heavier than the heat pressing down on the village. Taxes, an unending burden carved deep into the bones of your daily existence. You step outside to see the tax officials standing by the road, their finely woven linen robes a stark contrast to your own worn garments. Their faces are stern, eyes sharp as they tally lists and record the offerings. Their presence is a reminder of the invisible hand that controls your life, the Pharaoh's reach extending into every grain of wheat, every drop of oil, every corner of your humble home. Your family gathers what little you have, grain, a few dates, a small jar of oil, offered reluctantly, each item a sacrifice from your own survival. The collectors measure and weigh, their numbers exact and unyielding. There is no room for mercy or negotiation. To refuse is to invite punishment. To comply is to inch closer to emptiness. You watch as a neighbour protests softly, his voice trembling. The collector dismisses him with a cold glance and a warning. You feel the weight of fear pressing on your throat, a silent pact between those who rule and those who obey. The taxes support the temples, the priests, the armies, and the construction of monuments that rise above the village like silent sentinels. To the world, they symbolize Egypt's greatness, but to you, they are a daily reminder of what is taken. Labor, resources, and the precious moments stolen from your life. As the sun climbs, the tax collectors depart, their carts heavy with the fruits of your toil. The village feels emptier, the day quieter. You wonder how many seasons must pass before the scales tip in your favor, before the sacrifices yield more than just survival. Yet life presses on. The fields must be tended, the children cared for, the next harvest prayed for. The burden of taxes is a constant shadow, shaping every choice, every hope, every breath. The heat of midday settles like a heavy blanket over the village, and you find a quiet spot beneath the shade of a date palm. Nearby, women gather by the well, their voices low and steady as they draw water in clay jars. Their lives unfold in a rhythm unseen by many, the quiet backbone of your community, bearing burdens that often go unspoken. You watch as they carry heavy loads back to their homes, water for cooking and washing, bundles of reeds for weaving, baskets of food gathered at dawn. Their hands move with practiced grace, yet beneath the surface lies a fatigue that no rest fully erases. The work is endless, from preparing meals to caring for children, tending small gardens and managing the household while the men labour in the fields or on royal projects. The women's roles are bound tightly to tradition and necessity. They support the village's survival through silent endurance, their strength measured not in monuments but in daily acts of care and resilience. Yet their lives are constrained. Decisions, rights and freedoms lie largely beyond their reach, dictated by custom, law, and the weight of expectation. You hear whispers of those who resist or dream differently, of stories passed in secret about women who wield influence behind temple doors or in market squares. But these are rare, fragile sparks amid the prevailing order. As the sun begins to wane, the women gather again, sharing news, laughter, and sorrow in equal measure. Their voices weave a tapestry of community, hope, and quiet resistance. In their presence, you sense a deep current of life that sustains the village, even as the world above presses down with demands and hardships. Their strength is unseen by the statues of kings and gods, unmarked by the inscriptions that glorify conquest and piety. Yet, it is as vital as the Nile's waters, as enduring as the shifting sands. And in this subtle, uncelebrated labour, life in ancient Egypt breathes, fragile but unyielding beneath the relentless sun. The morning air is thick with dust as you join the procession of villagers marching toward the building site at the edge of the desert. The command to contribute labour to the pharaoh's grand projects is not a request, but an unyielding decree. Your muscles ache even before the day begins, anticipation mingling with resignation. Rows of rough-hewn stones lie scattered, waiting to be shaped and lifted into towering monuments. The overseers, their eyes sharp and voices sharpener, move among you, prodding, commanding, reminding that there is no room for weakness or delay. The labour is grueling, the sun relentless, the water scarce. You work alongside men brought from distant villages, their faces marked by exhaustion and silence. Some carry heavy blocks, others chisel precise lines in the limestone. The sweat streams down your face, mingling with dust and grit. Your hands blister, your back screams, yet you push on, driven by the knowledge that refusal means punishment worse than toil. The monuments rising in the distance are magnificent. Massive pyramids, temples adorned with intricate carvings, statues towering over the landscape. They proclaim the power of the pharaoh, the glory of Egypt. But you know their foundations are built upon the backs of people like you, tired, hungry, and unseen. Food is meagre, rest scarce, and illness often strikes those weakened by relentless labour. Stories circulate of accidents, of bodies buried under collapsed stones, of silent graves far from home. Yet these stories are whispered, hidden beneath the pomp and ceremony that celebrate the king's divine rule. As the sun sets, painting the sky with streaks of red and gold, you stagger home, your body heavy with exhaustion. The day's work is done, but the cost lingers, in aching limbs, in quiet despair, in the knowledge that this is but one day in a life filled with many more like it. The grandeur above you is cold and distant, a stark contrast to the brutal reality beneath. In the shadow of the monuments, the lives of ordinary Egyptians are etched not in stone, but in sweat, sacrifice, and silence. The day begins with a reluctant stir as the first rays of sunlight spill over the horizon, casting a soft amber glow across the Nile's meandering waters. You rise from your simple sleeping mat, your body stiff and heavy from the previous day's labours, the ache in your muscles a familiar companion. Outside, the village is awakening slowly. The low murmur of voices mingles with the distant call of birds and the gentle rustle of palm fronds swaying in the warm morning breeze. You step into the narrow dirt path winding through the village, feeling the grit of dry earth beneath your sandals. Around you, the walls of mud brick houses rise unevenly, their surfaces cracked and weathered from years of sun and wind. The scent of cooking fires, burning wood and fragrant herbs lingers in the air, mixing with the sharp tang of the river and the faint, ever-present dust. Your destination is the field just beyond the village, where the earth awaits the touch of the sickle and the promise of sustenance. The land is both your lifeline and your burden. The Nile, which once brought fertile soil and life-giving water, has been unpredictable this year, its floodwaters lower and later than usual, leaving patches of cracked ground and parched crops. You know that the prosperity of your family, your neighbours, even your community depends on what the earth yields in the coming months. As you walk, you pass other villagers, farmers, labourers and artisans, each carrying their own silent worries beneath their steady steps. The children follow at a distance, their laughter fleeting and bright, a rare spark of light amid the greyness of daily struggle. Their innocence is both a comfort and a painful reminder of the hardships they will inevitably inherit. At the fields, the heat intensifies quickly. The sun climbs higher, its golden rays turning the soil to dust and the air to a dry haze. You bend over the brittle stalks of grain, the sickle cutting through them with a rasping sound. Sweat beads on your forehead, trickling down your face and mingling with the dirt. Your hands are calloused, the skin cracked from relentless toil, but you continue without pause. The harvest must be gathered before the unforgiving sun reaches its zenith. The labour is grueling, and yet it is only one facet of your life's unending cycle. Beyond the fields, the village holds its own hardships, the constant worry over food and water, the threat of disease that slips quietly through households like a shadow, the ever-watchful eyes of tax collectors who claim a portion of your yield to feed the lavish courts and temples. You recall stories whispered at night, of neighbours lost to illness or hunger, their names fading as quickly as footprints on the sand. The temples that rise in distant cities boast of God's favour and eternal order. Yet here in your village, faith and survival are tangled in complex threads of hope and despair. The oppressive weight of royal demands presses down on your shoulders, mandatory labour on monumental projects that stretch endlessly across the land, forcing you away from your family and fields for weeks or months at a time. The glory carved in stone by these works feels distant and hollow when your body aches and your belly gnaws with hunger. Still, life persists. Your mother prepares a simple meal from the smallest stores, mixing grain and lentils into a thin porridge. Your children gather near, their eyes wide with quiet curiosity and fatigue. In these moments, there is a fragile warmth, a glimmer of resilience born from shared hardship and unspoken bonds. As the sun dips toward the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, you rest beneath a lone acacia tree. The cooling breeze carries whispers of the river, a gentle reminder that life, no matter how fragile, flows onward. The night will bring its own challenges, darkness filled with the sounds of creatures unseen, the worry of illness, the fear of the unknown, but also the possibility of rest, of brief escape from the relentless demands of your days. In the vast tapestry of ancient Egypt's history, the monuments and stories of kings dominate the canvas. But beneath the golden sun, it is the ordinary lives like yours, marked by labour, endurance, and quiet hope, that form the true, enduring fabric of this land. The dawn breaks slowly, the soft light revealing the outlines of your village still heavy with sleep and shadows. But beneath this quiet surface, an invisible threat lingers, an unseen enemy that creeps silently from house to house, weaving sickness into the fabric of daily life. Disease is a constant companion, shaping your world as much as the sun, the Nile, or the gods. You remember the last time fever gripped your brother, his skin hot and dry, his breath shallow and ragged. The local healer applied poultices and murmured prayers, but remedies are limited, and hope often hangs by a fragile thread. The temple priests claim that illness is a test from the gods, a punishment for imbalance, a warning to mend ways. Yet to you, it feels like an unyielding curse, random and cruel. The cramped homes and crowded streets foster the spread of ailments, parasites in the water, contaminated food, and the close proximity of bodies offering easy passage to plagues. Mothers clutch their children tightly, afraid of what unseen forces might invade their small bodies. You witness neighbours weaken and fade, their faces hollow, their voices whispering farewells. Funerals come too often, sombre affairs filled with tears and silent prayers for an afterlife more merciful than this one. The loss echoes through the village, leaving empty spaces and quiet sorrow. The disease does not discriminate. It touches the young, the old, the strong and the weak. Yet those who labour most, those like you, are often too exhausted to resist its grip. When sickness strikes, the village's fragile balance is upset, work slows, and hunger follows close behind. Despite the ever-present fear, life continues. People tend to the ill, sharing what little they have, holding on to rituals and faith even as their bodies weaken. The temple offers no cures, only rituals and sacrifices, further binding the people to a system that often seems indifferent to their suffering. As the sun climbs higher, you move carefully through the village, aware of the invisible danger lurking in every breath and touch. You pray silently, not just to the gods of health, but for strength, for endurance, for the chance to see another day beneath this ancient sky. In a land famed for its grand temples and eternal pyramids, It is these quiet battles against disease, fought without fanfare in shadows and whispered prayers, that reveal the true fragility of life in ancient Egypt. The morning sun climbs steadily, casting long shadows over the cracked earth of the fields you tend with weary hands. The crops, once promising and green, now bend low beneath the relentless heat, their stalks thin and fragile. The river that nourished this land so faithfully has been less generous this season, and with it, your stores have begun to dwindle. You rise each day before the dawn, pushing aside the gnawing emptiness in your belly to begin the endless tasks that keep your family alive. The meagre meals, thin porridge, a few roasted lentils, sometimes a stale loaf, do little to fill the hollow ache, but there is no choice. Sharing what little food remains means preserving hope, even as hunger tightens its grip. Around the village, faces grow gaunt. Children, their energy fading, play quietly in the dusty lanes. Mothers whisper prayers for a better harvest, for rain, for mercy. You see the slow retreat of strength in your neighbour's eyes, the subtle decline that sickness and starvation carve into the body and spirit. Despite the hardships, there is a determined resilience here. You trade what you can, woven mats, pottery, a handful of dates, with others to stretch scarce resources. The community holds together, bound by shared struggle and a quiet understanding of survival's fragility. Yet beneath this resilience lies a bitter truth. Life in ancient Egypt was never guaranteed, even in the land of plenty. The glory celebrated in the grand tombs and temples is a distant echo to those who face hunger's slow, steady toll each day. As the sun sets, painting the sky with muted colours, you gather with your family around the faint flicker of a small fire. There is little food, but the warmth and presence of those you love provide a small comfort, a fragile light against the long night ahead. In this quiet hunger, in these unspoken sacrifices, the true story of ancient Egypt's people unfolds, not one of endless prosperity, but of endurance beneath the weight of constant uncertainty. The village is quiet as you walk along the dusty road toward the centre, where the bronze image of the pharaoh gleams in the sun. His face, carved into stone and painted in brilliant hues, watches over the land with eternal authority. To the outside world, he's a god on earth, the bringer of order, the master of life and death. But for you, his image is a reminder of something more complex, a carefully crafted story that hides the cracks beneath the surface. You remember the grand festivals you once witnessed in the nearby city, where the pharaoh paraded in resplendent robes, surrounded by priests and soldiers, his every gesture magnified by chants and music. The temples sung his praises, the scribes wrote endless hymns glorifying his power and benevolence. In these moments, it felt as though the entire world revolved around his divine presence. Yet behind the splendour lies a world shaped by control. The tales of the pharaoh's wisdom and strength serve to reinforce a social order that benefits the few at the expense of many. The taxes you pay, the labour you give, the sacrifices your family makes, all justified by the promise of divine rule and cosmic balance. The propaganda reaches every corner of life. Children learn stories of the pharaoh's victories before they learn to count. The priests repeat his decrees as law, linking loyalty to the gods with loyalty to the crown. The monuments rising across the land are not just stone, but symbols of power designed to impress and intimidate. You wonder how many see through this carefully spun web, how many understand that the grandeur you witness is built on hardship and silence. The faces around you show resignation more than reverence, quiet acceptance more than devotion. As the sun dips low, casting long shadows from the statues that loom over the village, you feel the weight of these stories pressing down. The pharaoh's image, though distant and untouchable, shapes your world, guiding, demanding, controlling. In the heart of ancient Egypt's glory lies this subtle, unyielding force, royal propaganda. It masks struggle with spectacle, replacing truth with legend, and ensuring that beneath the golden sun, the ordinary lives of people like you remain unseen and unheard. As twilight softens the edges of the village, you find yourself drawn toward the temple precinct at its heart, where flickering torches cast tall shadows against worn stone walls. Here, rituals unfold daily, complex ceremonies that link the gods, the pharaoh, and the people in a dance of power, faith, and control. You watch the priests move with solemn precision, their voices chanting ancient prayers that echo through the cool evening air. The scents of burning incense and crushed myrrh mingle with the earth's natural aroma, creating a heady atmosphere both sacred and suffocating. For the ordinary people, these rituals are double-edged. They promise protection, blessings, and cosmic order, but also demand devotion, obedience, and sacrifice. You remember the times when families brought their limited offerings, grain, oil, or crafted goods, to the temple, offerings that weigh heavily on already thin resources. Participation in these rituals is not optional. Festivals mark the calendar, and absence is noticed, sometimes punished. The ceremonies reaffirm the divine right of the pharaoh and the gods, reinforcing the social hierarchy that governs your life. Yet beneath the surface, the rituals also bind the community. They create moments of shared identity and fleeting hope amid hardship. You see children's eyes widen at the sight of dancing priests and painted statues, hear the elders whisper stories of gods who protect and judge. Still, the burden remains. Time spent in ceremony is time taken from tending fields or caring for family. Resources poured into offerings could feed hungry mouths. Faith becomes both a comfort and a chain, a structure that shapes the rhythms of daily life, but also conceals the cracks beneath Egypt's shining facade. As darkness deepens, the chants fade into silence, and the village returns to its quiet. The rituals will resume with dawn, as unyielding as the sun itself, weaving the ancient spell that holds Egypt together and holds its people in place. The soft light of early morning filters through the reed mats that cover the window of your small home. You watch your children stir, their faces still delicate and unmarked by the harshness that time will inevitably bring. Childhood here is brief, fleeting, a fragile interlude before the weight of the world settles on young shoulders. From their earliest days, your children are introduced not only to the simple joys of life, the laughter, the small games beneath the palms, but also to the expectations and hardships that shape their futures. Education is scarce and often limited to the sons of the wealthy, or those destined for priesthood or scribal roles. Most children learn by watching and helping, their days filled with chores and errands that prepare them for the demands of adult life. You see your eldest daughter already carrying water jars to the well, her small hands steady despite the weight. Your son practices with a wooden stick, mimicking the men who will one day teach him to wield a tool or a weapon. Their play is tinged with seriousness, the innocence of childhood tempered by the knowledge that survival requires strength and skill. Illness and malnutrition claim many young lives. You hold your breath at every cough, every feverish glance, aware that the god's favour is not guaranteed. The joy of birth is shadowed by the knowledge that many children do not reach adulthood. It is a silent grief, woven into daily life. Yet in their eyes, you find moments of hope, a spark of resilience, a promise that despite the hardships, life endures. Their laughter breaks the heavy silence, and for a time, the world feels lighter. Still, the path ahead is narrow and steep. Childhood will soon give way to the realities of labour, obligation, and sacrifice. The bright dreams of youth will be tempered by the demands of survival, in a land where the sun shines relentlessly, and the weight of history presses heavily on every life. The evening settles quietly over the village, the sky deepening into soft shades of indigo and violet. In the dim light of your humble home, you sit beside a small wooden box, worn and plain, holding the fragile remains of a child taken too soon. The loss is a silent sorrow that echoes through every corner of your life, a grief shared by many but spoken of rarely. Death in ancient Egypt is woven tightly with belief, the promise of an afterlife, the hope for eternal peace beyond the harshness of this world. Yet no promise can soften the sharp ache left behind when a loved one vanishes, the empty space where their laughter and presence once filled the days. Funerals are simple for the poor, lacking the grandeur of tombs or elaborate rituals reserved for kings and nobles. You gather what little you can, a linen shroud, some offerings of bread and beer, prayers whispered softly into the night. The community joins in quiet mourning, their own losses reflected in your grief. You think of the many neighbours who have suffered similar heartbreak, the children never to grow old, the mothers who weep alone after the village falls silent. The weight of so many lost futures hangs heavy, a reminder that life in this land is precarious and fragile. Even as you tend to your daily tasks, the sorrow lingers beneath your steps, a quiet companion that colours your world in muted tones. The gods' blessings seem distant when confronted with such relentless loss, and faith sometimes falters under the strain. Yet life continues, fragile and enduring. Each new dawn brings the hope of healing, the strength to carry on, and the memory of those lost woven into the fabric of your existence. In this silent sorrow, the true cost of ancient Egypt's glory is revealed, not in monuments or hieroglyphs, but in the hearts of ordinary people who live, love, and mourn beneath the unyielding sun. As the heat of midday presses down upon the village, you find yourself once again preparing to surrender a portion of your hard-earned harvest to the tax collectors, figures both feared and resented, their presence a reminder of the distant power that governs your life. The tribute you must pay is relentless, a burden passed down through generations, tightening like a noose around your family's survival. The collectors arrive with official scrolls and stern faces, tallying grain, livestock, and goods, indifferent to the sacrifices required to meet their demands. You hand over sacks of barley and wheat, the fruits of your sweat and toil, knowing this loss may deepen the hunger that gnaws at your home in the months ahead. There is no room for protest. Refusal means punishment, fines, imprisonment, or forced labour. These taxes fuel the grandeur you have glimpsed only from afar, the massive temples, lavish royal courts, and monumental tombs dedicated to pharaohs who never meet your gaze. The spoils of your labour build the glittering cities and statues that immortalize rulers as gods, while your own family faces scarcity and uncertainty. In the quiet moments between work and rest, you think about the disparity, the vast gulf between your daily struggles and the extravagance proclaimed as the glory of Egypt. The laws and decrees carved in stone speak of order and justice, yet their execution favours the elite, cementing a hierarchy where ordinary lives like yours are sacrificed to maintain an illusion of divine harmony. Even as the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows over the dusty fields, the weight of tribute remains heavy on your mind. It is a constant reminder that beneath the golden surface of ancient Egypt's splendour lies a world shaped by hardship and inequality, a world where your survival depends not only on the land and the river, but on the whims of distant power. The dawn light filters through the palm leaves as you gather your tools and prepare to leave the village once again, summoned for the labour demanded by the pharaoh's grand ambitions. The projects, pyramids rising like mountains, temples vast and ornate, are marvels in the eyes of many, but for you, they are monuments built upon exhaustion and sacrifice. You join the long lines of workers, farmers, craftsmen, and slaves alike, marching under the watchful eyes of overseers. The air is thick with dust and sweat, the rhythm of chisels striking stone and the grunts of effort blending into a harsh chorus. Your hands blister and your back aches, yet the work never ceases, dictated by a ruler who remains distant and indifferent to your pain. Weeks turn into months as you quarry limestone under the scorching sun, haul massive blocks, and carve hieroglyphs that praise the gods and the pharaoh's eternal reign. Each stone laid is a silent testament to the power structures that bind you, yet also a reminder of how little of this glory touches your life. The promise of rewards or reprieve is rare, and the fear of punishment for slowing or faltering is constant. At night, beneath a fragile shelter, you lie awake, body weary and spirit worn, thinking of your family left behind, how the fields need tending, how hunger gnaws, and how illness might claim another. The monuments will stand long after you're gone, hailed by history and tourists centuries later. But in this moment, as your sweat falls into the dust and your muscles scream for rest, you carry the true story of Egypt, the story of those who built its wonders with blood and toil, their names lost beneath the grandeur. The dawn breaks slowly over the horizon, the golden light creeping softly across the flat, endless landscape that stretches toward the distant river. You rise from your simple bed, the rough linen cool against your skin, and step outside into a world balanced precariously between abundance and desolation. The Nile, life's giver and taker, lies quietly in its channel, yet you know well the fragile cycle it governs. The flood, the planting, the harvest, each a phase in a relentless dance that shapes your existence. As an ordinary villager, your life is bound inexorably to the river's moods. When the floodwaters arrive, carrying silt, nutrients, and destruction in equal measure, you and your neighbours work tirelessly to prepare. Earthen banks are repaired, canals cleared, and seeds planted with a hope as fragile as the thin green shoots that will later break through the soil. The land is generous only if the flood is just right, neither too low to starve the earth, nor too high to drown the fields and homes. But the flood is unpredictable. Some years it comes late or fails to rise enough, leaving the parched earth cracked and hungry. Other years it overwhelms the banks, washing away crops, homes, and sometimes even lives. You remember a season when the water rose mercilessly, swallowing fields and forcing your family to seek shelter on higher ground. The hunger that followed was sharp and merciless, gnawing deep into bones and spirit. Between these extremes lies a delicate window of prosperity, but even then, life is a constant struggle against time and fate. The planting season is a race, working the soil with primitive tools, hoping the rain and sun will be kind. The harvest brings relief, but also anxiety. Will the grain stores last through the harsh months ahead? The granaries are never overflowing, and each sack taken to the temple for tax is one less for your own family's survival. Your days are long and filled with toil, from sunrise until your hands are raw and your body aches under the relentless sun. There is little time for rest or pleasure. The villagers gather in the evenings, sharing stories and quiet laughter that mask the deep worry about the uncertain future. The cycle of flood and famine is more than a natural phenomenon. It is a harsh teacher that shapes your community's rhythms and fortunes. It enforces a brutal truth. No matter the power of pharaohs or the grandeur of temples, the land and its unpredictable river hold ultimate authority over life. As night descends, you sit by the faint glow of a lamp contemplating this fragile balance. The stories carved into stone in distant palaces speak of Egypt as a land of eternal abundance, blessed by the gods. Yet here, in your hands rough from work and your belly sometimes empty, the reality is far more complex. An endless cycle of hope and hardship, where survival is never guaranteed and each new day is a quiet triumph over uncertainty. In this relentless rhythm, you live, love, and persevere, carrying forward the silent story of a people caught between the gifts and the curses of the Nile. The morning light falls softly on the small courtyard where you prepare your daily bread, the air filled with the faint scent of baked grain and earth. Around you, the village stirs, but beyond the dusty paths and humble homes lies a world sharply divided by invisible walls, social boundaries that dictate your place, your rights, and your future. You know well your role as an ordinary labourer, bound by birth and circumstance to a life of service and scarcity. The hierarchy is clear and unforgiving. At the top, the pharaoh and his court, surrounded by priests and nobles who command wealth and power beyond imagining. Below them, the scribes and skilled artisans hold a fragile middle ground, their education and talents granting a glimpse of security. And at the base, the vast majority, farmers, labourers and servants like yourself, live within strict limits, their voices seldom heard beyond their small communities. This social order is reinforced every day by laws, customs and expectations. Marriage, work, even the clothes you wear and the foods you eat mark your status. To challenge these boundaries is unthinkable, a threat to the cosmic order that the pharaoh embodies. The stories you hear in temple halls and market squares celebrate this order as divinely ordained, yet it feels more like chains woven from tradition and power. You observe the nobles passing through the village, their fine linen robes and ornate jewellery a stark contrast to your worn tunic and calloused hands. Their lives seem distant, almost unreal, a world of leisure, banquets, and endless privilege. Sometimes, you wonder what it would be like to live without the constant burden of labour, without the fear of hunger and disease. Despite the hardships, you find moments of community and kindness among your peers, a shared resilience that softens the edges of a harsh reality. Children play freely, laughter rings through the streets, and festivals bring brief respite from toil. But beneath these moments lies the quiet acceptance of a system designed to keep you in your place. The invisible walls shape every step you take, every choice you make. They define who you are, who you may become, and what the future holds. In the land famed for its mighty pharaohs and eternal monuments, the truth of social hierarchy is a constant presence, an unseen force as powerful and enduring as the desert sands. The morning air is thick with dust and the faint scent of herbs hanging to dry near your home, but beneath the surface of daily life, a quieter, more insidious presence lingers. Disease. You know it well. Its shadow stretches across the village, touching every family, every breath. Illness is a constant companion in this world. From fevers that sap strength to infections that fester without cure, the ancient Egyptians faced dangers invisible yet deadly. Medicine is rudimentary, relying on herbal remedies and prayers to the gods, yet many ailments resist these efforts, slipping silently through the community. You watch as neighbours weaken day by day, their skin pale and eyes dull. The children, so full of life just weeks before, become listless and frail. There is fear in every cough, every whispered symptom, because sickness often means slow suffering and sometimes death. Temples offer healing rituals, and priests chant incantations, but these are costly and limited, often reserved for the wealthy or those with powerful patrons. For most, the best hope is rest, care from family, and the fleeting comfort of faith. Sanitation is poor, and the close quarters of village life allow illness to spread swiftly. Wells and canals bring water, but also bacteria and parasites. Malnutrition weakens bodies, making disease more deadly. Epidemics flare without warning, leaving empty homes and grieving hearts. Yet life must go on. You tend to the sick with tired hands and a heavy heart, offering what little comfort you can. The cycles of health and sickness are woven into the fabric of your days, a fragile balance between hope and despair. In the grand stories of Egypt, the pharaoh's power is said to bring harmony and protection. Yet here, in the quiet corners of the land, disease reminds you of mortality's hold, unyielding, impartial, and deeply human. As the final light of day fades behind the endless horizon, you sit beneath the wide sky, the cool evening breeze carrying the faint sound of the river flowing steadily nearby. The land around you holds stories carved in stone and whispered in the wind, stories of grandeur, faith, struggle, and endurance. You have lived in the shadow of towering pyramids, watched the golden statues that celebrate kings and gods, and felt the weight of royal decrees pressing on your shoulders. Yet the true story of ancient Egypt is not only in these magnificent works or the sacred texts, it is in the quiet lives of those like you, people bound to the earth and the river, to cycles of flood and famine, to labour and loss, to hope and resilience. Your days are shaped by forces both natural and human, an unpredictable Nile, the demands of power far beyond your reach, the invisible hierarchies that define your place, and the fragile breath of health that sustains you. The life you lead is neither simple nor glorious. It is complex, often harsh, but marked by an enduring spirit. The monuments may stand eternal, but they tell only part of the story. The real Egypt is found in the footprints left in the dust, in the worn hands of workers, in the whispered prayers for survival and peace. As night deepens and stars emerge like distant fires, you close your eyes to the vastness above, carrying with you the silent history of a people who lived and loved beneath the burning sun, ordinary lives intertwined with extraordinary legacies. In this, you're part of a story older than the stones, a story of humanity itself, fragile, beautiful, and profoundly real. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the quieter, often unseen parts of ancient Egyptian life, the daily struggles, the hopes, and the endurance of ordinary people beneath the grandeur of their world. Remember, history is not just about kings and monuments, it is about the lives that quietly shape the course of time. Now, as you settle deeper into comfort, allow your mind to drift gently with the slow, steady flow of the Nile, peaceful, persistent, and eternal. Let the calm of the ancient world cradle you as you rest, carrying you softly towards sleep. May your night be restful, and your dreams gentle, and when you wake, may you greet the new day with quiet strength and calm. Good night.